very special treat for this segment. I have been sharing my faith for 40 years, and for the last 37 years, in all the times I've shared my faith, and now I'm speaking from a pulpit or from a lecture or to some larger group as opposed to the daily sharing of faith and leading people to the Lord. But when I've gotten up and talking, particularly to church folk, and maybe a prayer breakfast or a CEO dinner or a luncheon or whatever, and oftentimes Sunday morning services, and I'm giving my testimony, I always speak of one David McNutt, okay? And those of you who heard me know what I'm talking about, I'm sure, but David McNutt changed my life at a very critical time in my life when I was really calling out to God in the most fervent prayer I've ever prayed in my life as to what he wanted me to do with my life. And it was at a point one time when I thought that God was calling me into full-time ministry. And so I prayed this incredible prayer. And so before I tell you more of the story, the man that entered in at that point was David McNutt. And I've talked about David McNutt both in 1976 when he entered on the scene uninvited, and 24 years later, the year 2000, when he entered the scene uninvited again with some information he had to provide me. Well, anyway, those of you who heard my story, there's the man. David McNutt.
Thank you, Barry.
And we're buds, but we haven't hung out together.
Not much.
We've hardly seen each other.
Yeah.
We've seen each other maybe 6 times in our lives.
Yeah.
But it spans 37 years.
Right now it does.
And you changed my life. I mean, absolutely. I could have made a horrible mistake if you had not been obedient. Mm-hmm. Think about that. You know what I'm talking about.
That's what's so scary about this.
Wow. That was a moment in time. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for David McNutt. Let me tell you the story right quick. I was impressed and encouraged to start sharing my faith by a guy named Herb Ellingwood. He was legal affairs secretary for Ronald Reagan, Governor Ronald Reagan at the time. And I've told the story other times, so I don't need to go into detail on it. But he was so full of the Lord and joy, talking about how he was sharing his faith every day. He didn't even care about his fame. I mean, everybody knew him all over the nation. He was a very highly acclaimed, very respected person. But his joy, his confidence came from the Lord, and it just overflowed. He couldn't help himself. And he marked my life. And so I started sharing it. That was 1973. By 1976, I was doing it. You know, once you do something, you start doing it a little more often. You get a little better at it, and you start understanding a little more how to do it. And to the point where I was doing it with regularity by 1976. And finally to the point where I was beginning to think that God wanted me to go into full-time ministry, quote-unquote full-time ministry. So one afternoon, I closed the door to my office, and I prayed the most fervent prayer I ever prayed in my life, honestly. And I called out to God. I said, God, I want to know. I have to know. I'm a double-minded man right now, and I'm unstable. I mean, I don't know if I should go this way or that. I can't even concentrate on my work. So what do you want me to do with my life? If you want me to go to full-time ministry, I'll go into full-time ministry. I really will, God, but we have a small little business, a little family business. We were like 12 employees at the time in 1976. And if I left the business, I knew the business would most likely fail. I'm third generation leader of this business, and it would fail if I left it. And I looked and I said, I have 2 little daughters, and how am I going to feed it if I go into full-time ministry? But I said, God, if that's what you want me to do, I will do it. But for such a huge decision in my life, you're almost going to have to speak to me in an audible voice. And if you do that, if you confirm, if I really know you want me to go into full-time ministry, I'll do it. I'll do it. I promise you, God, I'll do it. And I ended that prayer. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I couldn't concentrate on my work, and I started putting my work away. And I looked down. My office at the time was right over the front door. And I looked down, and guess who's walking to the front door? David McNutt. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, now I know this guy. You know, I've seen him at church. You were on the platform. Savelle Phillips had you on the platform, retired too, the pastor at the time. And so I knew your story. I knew you grew up in the mission field. You're a missionary kid. Mm-hmm. I knew all that. Yeah. But I'm wondering, who's he coming to? He's not coming to see me. He doesn't even know me. We have no relationship. I'm thinking you're coming to see somebody else. And so the gal comes in. She says, there's a David McNutt here to see you. So I said, well, good, send him in. And you walked in this door with this big smile on your face. You shook my hand. And you said to me,
How's it going,
how's
Barry?
it going? Very simple
Yes,
question.
yeah.
How's it going? So I made this snap decision that, hey, he's a missionary kid, grew up in the mission field. He's probably not into cool cars and shiny paint finishes. That's probably not your highest priority. So I started sharing with you my experiences of leading people to the Lord and sharing with reps and praying with people. And I shared a number of stories with you. And in so doing, you said to me a very important statement.
What a wonderful ministry God has given you.
You said that. You said God's given you a wonderful ministry. I remember it rings in my ear. I've told this story hundreds of times since then. And so I said to you, well, what do you mean by that? What are you trying to tell me?
It's obvious that your business is your pulpit,
You hit me with that, man. And that rang in my ears.
and it's never quit.
It just rang in my ears. And I said then at that time, you didn't know. I said, David, you don't know this, but I just prayed this prayer not 20 minutes ago. I just prayed this prayer, and I explained the prayer to you that I'd prayed. And then you told me what Paul Harvey would say is the rest of the story.
The rest of the story was that I was on Red Hill going north when the Lord spoke to me clear as a bell, go and speak to Barry. Well, I argued with the Lord because I said I don't know him. 2 times he said it again. And then I said, Lord, I don't know him. And then the final time he said, are you going to go and speak to Barry? I knew then that I must turn around and go back. And that's what I did. I came right into your office, and that's when I met you.
You told me that time how you wrestled with God all the way to the
All
parking
the way
lot.
to the parking lot.
In your car.
In fear and trembling.
Walking to the lobby,
Yeah.
you said you were just, that is obedience. You know, there's a lesson here bigger than you and I. It's about being obedient to the call of God. How many times are we prompted to do something
That we don't do it.
and we shrug it off? And in our case, you did it. And here's a miracle. 37 years later, we're sitting here, and I tremble by it still. That God spoke to you at that time and gave me that message right on target, right at that moment.
Right.
That was amazing. That was amazing. And I've never been the same since.
Thank
Wow.
you. Thank you so much,
Wow,
Barry.
wow. We're going to come back because you have so many wonderful stories. I mean, you're sharing your faith every day.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about some of those right in our next segments. Okay, thanks.